From The National, this is Trending Middle East. I'm Yasmin Al-Taji. It's Friday, March 7th. Here are today's headlines. The National has learned U.S. officials held several rounds of direct talks with Hamas leaders in Qatar since the beginning of the year. They included U.S. President Donald Trump's envoy on hostage affairs, Adam Bowler, and two other U.S. officials. The sources said representing Hamas were senior officials Khalil al-Hayya, Zahir Jabarin, and Bassem Naim.
It is worth noting here that the U.S. had for years refused direct contact with Hamas since it banned the group as a terrorist organization in 1997.
The National's Hamza Hendawi reports.
However, the White House spokesman, Ms. Levitt, said that the hostage envoy, in his role, has the authority to talk to anyone. As for the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, his office confirmed that Israel was consulted, but added that Israel also, quote, expressed its opinion, unquote, on the direct talks. We also understand that the talks were held at the request of the Americans and that they were coordinated by mediators Egypt and Qatar.
They were held at a suburban hotel in Doha just before the Gaza ceasefire took effect on January 19. Meanwhile, Trump has threatened Hamas with an ultimatum. In a post Wednesday, the president told the group to release the remains of all deceased hostages, or, quote, it is over for you, unquote.
News of the direct U.S.-Hamas talks broke as Mr. Trump issued his toughest threats of further destroying Gaza if all remaining hostages are not released.
5 Americans are believed to remain among the hostages seized in the Hamas-led attack on Israel on October 7, 2023. 4 of them have been confirmed dead. The other, Idan Alexander, is believed to be alive. The UK has lifted dozens of sanctions on Syria. The government on Thursday said it removed 24 Syrian entities from its sanctions list. Those include the Central Bank of Syria, several petroleum companies, and the national carrier Syrian Airlines. Western countries are rethinking their approach to Syria after rebel forces led by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS, ousted former President Bashar al-Assad and his government last December. Last month, EU countries suspended a range of sanctions against Damascus. Those included restrictions related to energy, banking, transport, and reconstruction. The EU has a range of sanctions still in place, targeting individuals and economic sectors in Syria. The new HTS-led government has called repeatedly for the lifting of Western sanctions that were imposed during the war. The EU's 27 leaders met in Brussels on Thursday for emergency talks on boosting defense spending. The EU's 27 leaders met in Brussels on Thursday for emergency talks on boosting defense spending. It's a critical moment for the bloc that comes as Washington signals it'll no longer provide security guarantees to Ukraine and the continent. Ahead of the meeting, EU leaders were expected to endorse a 5-point plan put forward by European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. The plan, called Rearm Europe, could possibly mobilize $800 billion in defense investments for the continent, while also benefiting Ukraine.
The idea is that the Commission would give loans to EU countries as well as ease budget restrictions to allow them to spend more on defense specifically.
The National Sunniva Rose reports.
It's not clear how easy that will be because some countries like Italy and France are facing tight budget situations. They invited Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in a show of support, and he appeared smiling and shaking hands with EU leaders shortly after arrival. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said it was a watershed moment for Europe, which she said faces a clear and present danger.
EU leaders have expressed alarm at the Trump administration's sudden withdrawal of support for Ukraine. It followed an explosive meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at the Oval Office last week.
We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that. Remember this. You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel.
What is clear is that US President Donald Trump has for now turned his back on Zelensky, and that's a cause for much dismay here in Europe, where he's viewed as a hero. In a speech, Macron said that Europe must be prepared in case the US does not stand by its side in the event of another Russian attack.
Politico reported senior members of Trump's administration have held talks with opponents to Mr. Zelensky in an attempt to pressure him to hold elections. That came after Trump called Zelensky a dictator for not holding elections at war. But Ukrainian opposition leaders have rejected the notion of holding wartime elections. The Ukrainian constitution bars elections under martial law.
Europe also wants the US to be involved in offering security guarantees to Ukraine should it accept a ceasefire. The continent continues to send military aid to Ukraine, even though the US has stopped. For example, Belgium confirmed that it will be sending F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine next year. New ideas have been floated, such as sharing France's nuclear deterrence. So France is the only EU country with nuclear weapons. And that was an idea put forward by French President Emmanuel Macron and Germany's likely next Chancellor Friedrich Merz. There's also been talk of sending peacekeepers on the ground to Ukraine, though Mr. Macron's made it clear that would be only after a ceasefire has been struck with Russia.
That's all for this morning's headlines. You can get these stories and follow live updates at our site. Yasmin Altaji, The National.